Lovely to see all of you here. Startups are so much the fabric of Bangalore, and I'm so happy to have this discussed here at a venue that I've really enjoyed visiting so often in the past. And I'm hoping we can give you a taste of what I feel is really also very much at the heart of this city, that which is really something that I call home have called home for many decades. So Kunal, are you also a long-time Bangalore person, or are you new to the city?
I built my first company, Freecharge, between Bombay and Bangalore, but largely out of Bangalore. So I was there 4 days a week for the first, between 2013 to 2015. Then I was in and out because of the role in Sequoia and other things. But since January 2018, I've been here. So you can say I'm somewhere in the middle right now.
Somewhere in the middle. So I guess we can give you citizenship of this city with the great weather, as you mentioned. So welcome, Kunal. We're really looking forward to the conversation. I thought before we begin, the two of us start talking, I thought maybe, Kunal, you could just tell everyone a little bit about what you have done and with the work that you have done, and really maybe also weave in a little bit of how Bangalore plays a part in it in terms of the technology talent perhaps that's been available here, and how that has helped you build not just the first one, Freecharge, which, by the way, I think E.T. wrote the story of it being acquired. So it was the largest acquisition at that point of time, upwards of 400 million, I think, way back in 2015. And how CRED is being built here with that very specific focus that you have on a particular market category. So over to you if you want to tell people.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me over here. It's slightly more anxious than any other time I've spoken. This audience is a unique blend of thing. I've always come here attending and sitting on the steps over here.
That's very true. That's true of me too. I've mostly listened.
But it's good to be here. I have a unique background, or I'm, let's say, an accidental tech founder. I'm a philosophy major. I got into philosophy by accident, also because the family went through financial crisis when I was 14, 15, and I had to do a full-time job while getting into a college. So the only morning batch that was available was philosophy, and everything else was in the daytime. So I had to pick philosophy for that.
I think we should really sort of take note of this. To have a philosophy major having built 2 of India's unicorns, I think just for that he needs a round of applause, folks.
And I'm actually quite scared for India that we do not have more humanities people leading some of the leading companies, because we often don't understand the secondary impact of a lot of the things that we do or not do. I had the luxury of getting brainwashed with philosophy, both Western and Indian philosophy, early in my life. I have always been a person who's been passionate in building, so I have, much before building Freecharge and CRED, I have run a cyber cafe, I have taught internet in Vintech, NIIT AppTech, I have built a small Mehndi business, I used to have a pirated CD business, I've done all sorts of things to get to being called a unicorn finally, which I don't know if it's a word we should be celebrating to start with. But the thing is, I think I've just been a student who's significantly, I would say I'm above average curious to most people, and I'm constantly seeking insights and trying to understand the world. I got into tech again by accident. I thought I was building a marketing company. It turned out to be, it was one of the largest payments company, which was Freecharge. If you pull up the articles of association of Freecharge, you will not see payments mentioned anywhere. It just turned out to be the largest payments company back in the day. What happened is that just being close to the Indian consumer. By the way, I also built a large BPO company back in the day.
That was before Freecharge? Before
Freecharge.
Okay.
And I have also built a marketing solutions company. So as you can imagine that, another thing about India, we do not have enough serial entrepreneurs. And I figured out why when I had my exit in Freecharge. I thought it was a great moment, a moment to celebrate capitalism, an exit, great outcome for my team members, great outcome for the investors, everything being thing. But what I noticed on social media is absolute mockery and hatred, which continues till date, about, oh, you sold this. But I think in India, we have not understood that companies can be bought, sold, done thing. We still think of them as some empires that have to be built. So
built for the long term,
we
right?
do not understand. And I still remember many of my relatives called me to express regret and unhappiness that, oh, you had to sell your business. I hope everything is okay and all of that. So it was an interesting thing that, and I had no other founders to ask, what does it feel like having an
It was
exited
one of the
business?
very
It was the earliest.
early exits.
I mean,
yeah.
actually significantly earlier. Like I just realized it's almost a decade now.
It's a decade now.
And what I noticed is that we just, then I realized that we just do not really understand capitalism at the core, right? How many of you have studied capitalism for more than 5 to 10 hours in your life? Like 7, 8, 10 people over here. And this is scary because we are trying to play the game of capitalism with the blood of socialism, right? And it causes all sorts of dissonances on how things should be. For example, and therefore, we have this weird relationship with our entrepreneurs in the country, right? And I think it will take some time before we get there.
Can I just take you back a little bit, Kunal, because I know you mentioned earlier also that, of having, sort of in a sense, come into entrepreneurship at the age of 14 and 15. I think that's something that you might want to tell us. How is it that, and I think I've heard you speak earlier also about particular communities in India that are more attuned towards business rather than, follow the path of get that degree and find that, find that job in a multinational corporation. Clearly you bucked that trend and you started early. And that's interesting for a city like Bangalore, where again, sort of getting that degree is prioritized over starting up. But that is the societal fabric of the city. But what has happened is this has also become India's startup capital, where people are going out and taking these bets and starting up as well. So is this a moment of time in India where you're seeing a change? I know you were speaking of entrepreneurs not being valued, but I think in actual fact, that is not perhaps what's happening, because a lot more young people, if you look at them on campuses these days, will probably say they want to go out and build the free charge, right? I think so there is a shift that's happening.
There is a shift for sure, right? More people want to be getting that status.
Yeah.
But I don't think there is enough understanding of what the journey means. And ultimately, the goal of any business is to eventually become big, large, profitable, give good outcomes to investors, team members, everybody who invested behind that. For example, most of the companies built before the startup generation did not share wealth. ESOPs was not very common till, let's say, Mr. Narayan Murthy kind of got that thing going.
We are in ESOP city right now.
Yeah, but now we have into a different thing, and still, it's still, we are far away from Indian corporates or Indian companies still to kind of really incorporate that, except the tech startups or the VC-funded ones. You don't see this as a common factor yet. So I think the understanding and relationship with wealth is something that is still not fairly understood. But coming to the Bangalore point, right, I think the advantage of having the best tech talent that one could get, weather does play a role, and it's a true story that a lot of people would not want to move because of that. And when it comes to, let's say, early global tech companies coming over here, the early IT companies getting built around Bangalore, kind of created a network effect of this talent to be here. But what as I've spent more time building more companies, so you talked about, like, I come from Bombay, I'm from a Gujarati Jain family, the businesses thing. I did not know what is IIT till I launched Free Charge. After 2 years later, somebody told me that, oh, this guy's from IIT, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. And it's such a shock, cultural shock for me to come to the city where some of these things are actually significantly more respected.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
I did not know, by the way, how does one become an IPS officer or an IS officer. I had no clue. I got to know only in 2014, 2015. I think that's what like the business community kind of isolates you from. But when I met Mr. Dilip Sanghvi, who is the founder of Sun Pharma, recently, and I told him that one of the things I should do is be a delivery boy of Sun Pharma goods, and I remember all the products that I used to deliver. And I just wanted to say hello to you, and he's like, so what do you do? And I said, I run this company called as CRED. And he knew everything about CRED, including our revenue scale, what are we focusing on, all of that. And that's when I realized this person is probably about 60 years for sure age, and the sharpness about business, right? And over here, like what you will see very easily, like people will still make a mockery saying, oh, so what's CRED's business model? Now the thing is that, like if Dilip Sanghvi, as a Sun Pharma founder, has nothing to do with fintech, could figure it out. But I think in our country, the curiosity about what is the real thing, and I think also what happened is and I'm not blaming ET for it, but we just announced just funding news too much, and okay, this person is getting funded or this person is dying. So it became like, I call it the Ganpati problem, that we make them the god and then we do the resurgence out of that, right? So it's a pattern that continued.
That's true.
And versus making people understand and empathize with the entrepreneurial journey is. The other thing that happened is, which I'm not too sure if it's good or bad for the country, is, let's say, a phenomenon called as Shark Tank, where we have now clearly established that only way you can do a business is to have capital.
True.
Right?
I think that is the received wisdom, right?
Yeah,
that is
but 99% of businesses in India are done without any VC funding, and businesses have existed before tech startups ever existed. And now everybody assumes that they only can do business if they have capital. It's like saying that I cannot run till I have Nike shoes, right? And it's causing this very skewed view, and people think that all their businesses are fundable, right? Which is not the case, and people don't understand what VCs want and how that world works. So we are in an interesting flux. I think Bangalore still needs to get deep about capitalism. A lot of people have mocked about that there are lots of IPOs from Delhi and not from Bangalore.
Yeah.
While that is half mockery, it's also half truth. The thing is that a large amount of profit pools coming from our tech startup ecosystem, building products that global customers, not just SaaS, but B2C customers use. I think we have a long way to go, but we have a great start. We couldn't have asked for a better start. The last, Freecharge was exited before UPI came. So much has happened since then. And a lot of us are still building companies and being here. A lot of us have the option to kind of move out of the country and do other things, but India's opportunity is so real right now. But I think we need to get to the truth of it. There is nothing glamorous about being an entrepreneur. It's just mostly painful and lonely journey. And no matter what you do, it's going to be always having non-stop mockery and judgment. But
I don't think it's as bad as that. I think y'all are celebrated quite a lot also, Kunal.
I think that's true. Only when you get to the unicorn status, there are hundreds of startups that fail before getting funded. Hundreds of startups who go through really rough times and they leave their jobs, take risks. And I think as a country, we need to celebrate failures a lot more than we celebrate unicorns.
Completely.
And I think only then a lot more people will dare. Because I think celebrating a few versus actually talking about, I have mentioned this multiple times, I'll repeat this. In Portugal, I was there once and I saw this beautiful thing in the church where there is a cemetery outside, but only some tombs were allowed to be inside the church. So I asked the guide that, why are these people inside? And they said, this is the royalty and the risk takers.
Okay.
So the Vasco da Gama, the Christopher Columbus, these are the guys who got the same status as royalty because they were risk takers.
That's a very interesting interesting angle.
And how many risk takers do we know or celebrate? And we have made movies of every gangster, every scamster, multiple movies of them, but where are the stories of our entrepreneurs?
I think I would, at the risk of prepping my own book, I think I should say I've made a beginning by writing about it.
And the book is outside, guys, so don't forget to get that.
No, but I just wanted to go back to the point that you were making, which I think is really interesting for a city like Bangalore, which has a huge startup culture and also has this very important professional kind of, sort of a backbone that has, in a way that has given rise to the talent that you spoke of, right? The tech talent, which made it possible for these companies to come here. You mentioned the loneliness of starting up. So what, to your mind, would be the three qualities or the attributes that are required to build a company? And I won't even say build for the long term. I'm saying to just make that decision to go out and to do business, right? Because we are here in a city where that is not really the first reaction that a young person would have. Like, will I go out and do business? The idea of business itself is seen as not something that families would prioritize. But the startup culture changed that up to a point, right? Tech startups were seen as aspirational in a sense. But the point that you're making is it is not just the celebratory part of it. There's hard grind behind it. And it's the same as in building every other business. I think maybe some of that, to take this whole, shall we say, the glamour around tech startups and also make the case for it being business, which is what India is very good at, right?
Yeah. First of all, I'm going to talk about what are the traits that you need to kind of take the decision of not doing a job and be a business person. And then I'll talk about, like, when does a startup become a business and what are the things that needs to change. I think, first of all, what I have seen, I've invested in many startups and I've seen patterns on what kind of entrepreneurs make it or not make it. And I'm using the word making it as some version of success. I don't want to say that, unicorn is the only marker, but like some credible thing to say that, hey, this business is real.
And it's also important, I think, to make the point that Kunal is possibly one of India's biggest angel investors. 200 and counting? But I think so.
It's my way of paying it forward. I just want to clarify that I invest in startups as a way to pay it forward. I do not have any stocks, any mutual funds. I only pay it forward through investing in startups. I can't thank probably 1,000 people who have helped me to get to the point that I have gotten to. This is my way of somewhat paying it forward and be part of the journey of many entrepreneurs and hopefully cause the ripple effect of them causing the same thing to paying it forward and hopefully see the country change into be more entrepreneurial versus job seeking.
Sure.
So that's a small attempt in that direction. I don't see this as a way to make money necessarily. I believe that building companies is still the most reliable way. Angel investment is a very risky category. So many of you get inspired by looking at becoming angel investor. I would say that it has the lowest success rate and don't get excited by the title of putting angel investor in your LinkedIn. It's a bad idea. A lot of people sell a lot of things to you to decorate your LinkedIn. Not a good idea. Choose things carefully. But coming to the characteristics I've seen, so one unique character I've seen of people who become good entrepreneurs or success of entrepreneurs is they are usually bad employees.
Okay, that's interesting.
Because they find it very hard to obey rules, right? And therefore, they should have strong values, but have struggled with rules enforced by somebody else. Those usually the kind of people who actually do a good job in the startup world, right?
How do you determine this?
You will see patterns in their conversation. For example, you can see how well prepared their documents. For example, one clear sign I've seen that I know that this startup that I've invested is not going to make it is that the amount of effort they write their monthly email updates with so much compliance and subservient tone in it.
All right.
It tells you that this guy is not going to make it because you need a very strong opinion and not need to impress your investors to win, right? It's a very counterintuitive thought.
So you want rule breakers?
Otherwise you can't build a company to start with.
Okay.
Right? The world is already solved in some ways. Like, why do you need to solve anything then? right? Who wanted quick commerce? And people mocked it.
Yeah.
And now everybody's using it, right? So you need the people who can break rules. The second thing I have seen is that extraordinarily thick skin, because you will, no matter what level of achievement you will get to, you will always be doubted, you will always be mocked, you will always have to convince one person to give you business, join your company, invest in your company. It doesn't end, ever. It doesn't even end for Elon Musk, just to be very clear, right? It just, you have to just be deeply shameless and thick-skinned together, right? And the third thing I would say is that if you really think that you don't do well in sales, like you're going to have a hardest time being an entrepreneur, right? Because it's 100% all the time fully a sales job. You may not think it's a sales job, but you're always trying to persuade, convince people to do something that you want to do and wish that people believe in that.
So in a sense, you're saying you're selling the idea and not just the product.
All the time. No matter what you get, every stage you will have to constantly sell, and there is no given to you, because like people want stable jobs. Who wants to join startups? Now it's glamorous, but let's say we have funding winter and announcements of thousands of people are getting fired. We've not had that situation before, right? We always wanted stability in jobs. And therefore what happens is that, oh my God, people are getting fired is getting into the news, but that's what startups are. 90% of all funded startups are going to die. They can survive sometimes by letting go of some people and pivoting. But a lot of times we are not there to understand that we have to accept this as part of capitalism, but we are far away from that.
So for a founder then, I'm not even talking about the investor. For the investor, I understand you make these investments in search of that disproportionate return that you will get out of the winners. But what's in it for the founder? Like, why would somebody here want to be a founder if just 10% of success? The success rate is
success rate is actually significantly low. I think funded startups have a 10% success.
Okay, now that makes it even more.
I don't know. It must be some kind of a disorder, I guess, in some ways that you would want to still do it. But I think it is extremely fulfilling. If I have to make one sales pitch for entrepreneurship, that success is not guaranteed, but nothing will make you more self-aware in life than building a company. You will know exactly what are you good at, bad at, and there is no place to hide, right? There is nobody to really report to and blame. It's just you. Everything is just you. Success will have lots of people who will share it, right? Your investors will celebrate how we were smart enough to invest early. Your early employees will say, oh, I knew it. This is going to be the big breakout company and unicorn. Everybody will claim it all over the place. But if it fails, it's just going to be that one person. And everybody will find an excuse to say, a lot of investors stop hiding the names of companies that have failed in their investments, in their LinkedIn, right? And that's the classic sign of that, like they say that, no, success has many fathers and failure is an orphan.
Yes.
It is what it is. But the joy of, by the way, you'll be significantly more interesting when you're older to everybody else, because you have so many more stories to talk about versus being in a job. And honestly, unless we become this, how will we progress as a nation? So from that perspective also, I think we need more of that. The only thing I would say is that don't do it for the status of being called an entrepreneur, because it's become cool now. I'll tell you the funniest story. I recently got a haircut in Bombay, in Bandra. I had to go for a government meeting next day, and I did not plan it properly. And this guy cuts my hair and says, sir, can you wear your glasses? So I wore my glasses. You look like an entrepreneur. So ye look, entrepreneur wala look hai. And that's so funny, like it's become a status to become an entrepreneur, right? A lot of people want to just go to Shark Tank to become cool and known, but I think that's a very troubled direction to go into, that it is about building, giving returns to people who have believed in you, employees, investors, and it's going to be very, very hard. And I don't think there is anything harder, because you think, okay, it becomes easier, become unicorn, the problem becomes 100x, 1000x. It exponentially keeps becoming harder and harder. And you have to really enjoy this pain. And I can't explain this in any other way, but most people who are entrepreneurs, like, when I meet them, like, there is some weird energy of just enjoying pain.
You spoke earlier about how Bangalore needs to actually embrace more of the capitalist spirit. I think you mentioned that earlier. In that context, we have this really, you have the go for broke e-commerce boom that is very much a Bangalore phenomenon. And also you have the digital public infrastructure built out from one locality in this city, and that has, in a way, become one of the most significant technology exports out of India. Why don't you just unpack this for all of us here and tell us how do you, because the fintech boom, for instance, companies like yours, all of these are built on the digital platform that, that began with Aadhaar, went on to the India stack later. So how did this happen, and what do you think is the role that, is this, I mean, this is turning the capitalism thing, we are going open source with this. We are saying build on these platforms that are public-private, a combination of public-private initiatives, and you have entrepreneurial work that is being built on, and you have a whole bunch of startups, including yours, Zerodha from Bangalore, all of them which have been built on these platforms.
Yeah.
So are we making, are we socializing technology startups in a sense?
It's a very dangerous line, so I'm going to come to that. So I think what we've done is understood that unless we reduce the cost of reaching every citizen to crash and leapfrog to technological ways of doing things versus waiting for the physical infrastructure to get there. We got that memo right. We executed well. Multiple people, Nandan and others who kind of worked on this, with all their might behind this and got us to a point where we have all of these things that we are very, very proud of, and more things that are coming, right? And I think we could show to the world that there is a way you can actually accelerate these things in a very short period of time. For example, Freecharge exited before UPI came.
Absolutely.
Right? So
do we want to just speak a little bit more of what actually digital public infrastructure is that we in Bangalore take so much pride in the city with the slowest commute? Physically, we have money that can move at the speed of light. So maybe we just want to unpack that? Yeah,
I think start from Aadhaar, goes to UPI. Now we have ONDC, you see aggregator ecosystem. You see now ULI being talked about. You think about Nammayatri being built on some of the DPI infrastructure. So I think we have constantly done more things, and more things are still coming. And you will see rehaul of many of the, let's say, the archaic friction-driven systems, which made it expensive and inefficient to serve the needs of millions of Indians, kind of being addressed through DPI. And many fintechs have managed to build on top of these infrastructures. Absolutely. For example, a CRED would have not been possible without UPI. Because of the cost structures, the frictionless experience, all of that is possible because of that. When it comes to the ecosystem being built on top of that, I would say 80-90% of fintechs are actually built on top of using some version of digital public infrastructure, right? If you saw the boom that happened on, let's say, the investor market, that also happened because of the KYC friction going away, and a lot of these things were built into that. So I think we have leapfrogged. When you travel abroad now and you show some of our capabilities, like, most countries are just shocked at the kind of stuff that we have managed to do, right? But to just bring a balanced view to this, I think we are still, if there is a, let's say, 100 rupees is a profit that exists in financial services, less than 1 rupee is made by fintechs yet, right? So we are still to see that part play out, where leveraging that thing and kind of monetizing these things. Because right now what happens is, let's say when you offer something for free or you make it frictionless, it can get the adoption, but ultimately to sustain some of these things, you'll have to monetize and also need to make sure that it is not just the global players who have kind of taken advantage of some of these infrastructure, but local Indian innovation kind of take a big part in that. And I think that's where the next stage or next decade will kind of shape up, because now we have learned how to build stuff. Now we know how to build some of these companies over here, get them to become really, really powerful and get very young entrepreneurs. The average age of entrepreneurship is dropping quite significantly, right?
When we come to quick commerce, I think we should
yeah,
talk really
yes,
about the...
Yes, and I think we are seeing a pattern of like some of these things kind of changing. Not too long ago, I remember discussing with Shailendra Singh at Sequoia that how many companies make more than $100 millions of revenue, and in Sequoia alone. And he mentioned that that time it was probably one company, and this is 2016 time frame. Now,
when UPI had just been launched.
And now in Sequoia's or Peak 15's portfolio alone, there'll be like maybe 50, 60 companies with $100 to $150 million of revenue, and all of that has happened just in a very short period of time.
On the back of the digital public infrastructure.
Yeah, some of it is, I would say a large chunk of that is that. But when it comes to the overall evolution, right, we should not forget that there's a big role telco played, and the cost
Absolutely.
of data crashing,
yes,
that played a huge role. Smartphone adoption, we should not forget that there was a chief technology officer in every household between the age group of 5 to 20 who played a big role to take the family forward.
Exactly.
Right? All of you remember in the COVID time, it's this the chief technology officer which got everybody vaccinated also.
Exactly.
Right? Because they got how to get the app and figure out how to get the allocation and so on and
digital
so forth.
Digital literacy, right?
Yeah, so I think we've had multiple forces work for us, right? DPI has obviously allowed the pipeline to kind of make the ambition and motivation be met in the most frictionless manner.
Any reason you think that DPI, happened in Bangalore? Do you think there was an ecosystem that kind of lent itself to the development of DPI here?
I think a bunch of people who actually volunteered to participate over here, I think it took that approach with that mindset and with that mission to kind of really upgrade India. So Bangalore had a lot of these things going for itself. It had already doing a lot of tech before tech became as cool as it is right now. I think a lot of people who were seasoned, saw large systems, could imagine and envision some of these things. I think that played the key role. And I think ultimately the entrepreneurial ecosystem that kind of also picked up on top of that and built many things on top of that. I think it's just many factors coming together. Sometimes it also happens because people let it be.
Yeah.
And it had less interference from, because nobody imagined it to become this big.
Yeah.
So I think it's sometimes distance also plays its big role.
And also, in a sense, because see, a lot of time the discussion around DPI has been about how it's built at population scale. It was not designed for, it was not meant to be a Google or a Facebook in that sense for commercial, with a commercial motive. And this was meant really at the heart of it. I think it began with direct benefit transfers being possible for the largest number of Indians. So this is a very unique example, I think, of something that began with, sort of financial inclusion at its heart that has turned out to be a platform for entrepreneurial development, which without a parallel anywhere else in the world. So I was wondering if you would want to say how much of CRED's, sort of development or the idea of CRED, is built on the fact that this platform was available to you.
Yeah, I think, like I said, we would have not built CRED if UPI was not there. You could have not imagined a product like CRED, and therefore, it's surprising there is no product like CRED anywhere in the world still, which still shocks me that it's such an obvious product for the world to be building versus India to be building. But there are core ingredients that you need, which is a payment system that can work as reliably as we can with UPI. And I think that was the advantage that we could really get out of building this from here. I moved full-time to Bangalore for the same reason, that you could not imagine building something like this. It's just that we took a focus on these customers because we realized that everybody's building for the population scale, but ultimately you have to be capitalists and you realize that money is made where there is per capita income. And we should talk a little bit about that topic on how we'll get to per capita income of this country. But that's where we focus on it and kind of build on top of that. And I think we had a lot of guidance early on before launching. I met Nandan and the team and talked about what our vision was, and we got a lot of support in doing what we are doing. So one of the things that we've not talked about quite openly yet, and we'll probably announce it formally soon, is that 1% of CRED's cap table is CRED Foundation. And we have a mission with CRED Foundation to focus on financial literacy for the country and also prevention of frauds, because as we have made systems significantly more efficient, we have not upgraded human beings, and therefore we are dealing with all sorts of issues because of the extreme amount of frictionless society that we have created. And a lot of these frauds are going to get scarier with AI coming in, and we need to kind of prepare for that. So we are investing a bunch of things on that side as well.
That's an interesting one because, always one talks about it glibly, right? Innovation walks ahead and regulation follows behind, which is, I suppose, at one sense, it is understandable. But that has created huge amount of, like you say, the loopholes that you're talking about, right? And now technology is in the hands of everybody, for instance, right? From someone who's 80 years old to someone who's 12 years old is perhaps using UPI, is now, has a digital identity. So what are the frictions, like at an everyday level, how much does this worry you?
Yeah, I think we should be a lot more worried about this. And I think the nuance that is that you cannot fix this through regulation. Okay. It's the problem of core human behavior. If somebody calls you and you give them the OTP, you can't fix that through regulation, right? And let's say you solve this by OTP by calling it something else and doing something else. Ultimately, the humans are playing the weak link in some ways. And I think that is the part that requires education, right? For example, I often wonder that we have Crime Patrol, that is probably the largest watch show. We should have probably a digital Crime Patrol to talk how people get scammed digitally.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I mean, it's not even a laughing matter, right?
No, I actually did pitch to some of the guys that we would happy to sponsor if you can make a show like this. But all of us know in our families, somebody has got scammed through some FedEx scam or some classified scam or something or the other, some OTP, some rewards. The thing is that these systems are getting quite evolved. And we are living in a world where some of these things can kind of make things super efficient. For example, a lot of people get threatened and asked to transfer money seamlessly in no time, and that is now possible. Earlier, you could not do some of these things, right? So I think the topic is getting serious to really make people understand what responsible behavior with tech is. Because we made the tech super frictionless, but I think the moment we do things like cause fear, then we'll again regress and be scared of technology, right? Let's take an example. Smartphones can do harm or advantage, right? But let's say if we do not create the right guardrails, train people, make people understand how to use some of these tools well, we can actually make the fear happen and say, oh my God, we should not touch technology or not touch internet, right? And I'm worried about AI going through the same phase now, that we will start saying that, oh my God, I should be worried, and or versus absolutely ride that wave. And as a country with such young demographic, like we should be the country that is massively benefiting from AI versus kind of going into this shell.
But what I found interesting was your point about sort of regulation not being able to corral this. What then, I mean, so can digital literacy actually, sort of address the problem? I don't know, it can't solve the problem, but can it address the problem?
I think it can. You will notice that very few young people get defrauded, right? And
true.
I think making them responsible for being just like chief technology officer, you make them the chief security officer of the household. We will do probably a great job. And I'm sure many of you have coached your family members on don't take this call, don't send this money. I'm sure all of you have done some of these behaviors already. But I think just actively talking about it, because technology is allowing both everybody in the family to be the one who can teach now.
Exactly.
Right? And I think we need to make this conversation kind of more public, be okay to talk about if something went wrong and share some of these things in a more open manner, so that more people learn from this and the stories get created in a manner that at least we fundamentally accept our own responsibility, because we can keep building more tech. My worry is that we keep more and more restrictions and more checks and more of that the entire technology frictionless we created. A classic example, in the US, every airport makes you remove shoes.
Yeah.
Because some 22 decades ago, somebody carried a bomb in the shoe, they were caught, but since then everybody has to remove shoe. I'm worried that we might just kind of bring some of these practices that, oh, just because there was one event of this nature, we've made this blanket thing that for 2 decades people are just following it for the sake of it, versus becoming truly frictionless.
So, but again, I don't know, but don't you think there is need for regulation also?
Absolutely.
That sort of correls this, right?
No,
Up to a point.
I'm just saying the frauds cannot be, regulation is required for responsible behavior by every single company. Regulation is required for making sure that there is no concentration happening. Regulation is required for ensuring that people are not building companies that are fly-by-night and duping customers. All of these are absolutely valid things, and I think our regulator has played the most amazing role of being proactive in innovation, but also proactive in regulation consistently. And I think, therefore, we have probably the most robust fintech ecosystem that is there anywhere in the world. And you see, like, the governor go on the stage and do demos of new products. Like, we don't see that. Like, I was part of the event where a lot of countries, regulators had come to talk about DPI, and they are shocked at like how we actively participate in the innovation and not just regulation. So I think it's a constant balance of both that is needed to kind of make progress.
I think, but there's also, I agree, I get that point, what you're saying about how the regulator must really, sort of build the guardrails for companies to keep them on the right thing. But from a consumer perspective, one is the fraud. The other is, of course, the concern about privacy, right? A lot of people now grapple with that because really data is all over the place. And, there's so much information out there, which is, in a sense, that is available to bad actors, can be misused, and so on. So what do you think is the responsibility of a tech entrepreneur from that perspective? How do you reassure consumers? What can be done?
I think, first of all, it's almost existential for a tech startup. If they do not respect anything to do with privacy or data, they are not going to exist. Forget about the customers trusting or not trusting. It's by law or a lot of these regulations, you will cease to exist in no period of time. But I think now we have a government bill that has come in. We have already got all the regulation, but we also have built the whole consent-based network. For example, account aggregator is a great example of how do you allow citizens to take control of their own data and choose where they want to share and not share, right? And I think it will also evolve. We will also have some bad actors in that. But because we have built this central system to kind of really address this, it'll keep evolving. But I think the core point is that it is going to be existential for entrepreneurs and companies who take this lightly, right? For example, CRED goes through nearly 100 audits, right, every year on all sorts of topics to do with data, security, privacy, all sorts of things. And that's just a cost of doing business. You can't say, oh, I will not be approved by this, I will not do this audit. Like we've gone and proactively done many of these things, because how does one create trust? Actually, forget about anybody else creating trust. If your employees don't trust you to do the right thing with customer data, India is a very easy society to know that this company cannot be trusted. So
exactly.
Trust doesn't come from outside, it comes from within the building first.
That's an important part of I think for a lot of consumers, I think from what you're saying also, tech is here to stay, right? It's not going to go away anywhere. And we can't be Luddites about it. You have to learn to deal with it, whether you're 80 years old or you're 12 years old. This is the world that we're going to be living in.
Yeah.
So
it's very scary when somebody says, I'm not very good with tech.
Yeah.
Like that part really worries me, because in this world that we're living in right now, it's almost like the new caste system.
That's an analogy. That really is, actually. And how do you rate India in terms of adoption? Because you are a tech entrepreneur, you're in the business of sort of putting out tech products for consumers. Where does India rank on this scale?
On adopting technology is very high. Making a lot of profit by building technology companies, very, very low.
Okay. So is that, you offer things free, right? So to the
No,
consumer.
free things are done to build distribution. You still have to monetize. Facebook offered free social network for years, but they have to monetize by building ads on top of it. Gmail is free, but they make money by doing something else with the data. Now the question is that the point is that ultimately we have to remember that businesses are there to make money and make profit and to create returns for everybody who's invested in these companies, be it employees or investors. We tend to be light on that usually, and we are still, the decade that we are entering right now, the tech startups will have to prove. 27% of US market cap is tech startups of US. Over here we are at 2-3% or probably 4% now.
But very much early days, right?
That's what I'm saying. That's
Zomato
a decade we have to
yeah.
embrace and really win on that.
Zomato is entering the Nifty soon. So, you know, so,
we,
that is
as I'm saying,
validation in about 2 or 3 years.
We need to do, and it's interesting, but the total number of companies who make more than 1,000 crores profit in India in public markets is probably 190 to 195.
Okay.
I'm just giving you the market landscape right now. 50% of India's market cap, some way or the other, is financial services. 50% of PAT of public markets in India is financial services. Consumption is still to make it into the top 2,000 most profitable companies, right? So we are like far away from truly getting to that stage where we are really getting the flywheel going. But hopefully we'll change this very, very soon.
So that flywheel is, again, you know, the larger economic situation itself that you're talking about, right? So it's not really restricted to these companies being able to build profitable
let's talk
businesses.
about consumers who can really pay.
Absolutely.
If you look at the startups, the top startups, including Zomato, it's at 18 million monthly transacting customers.
Okay.
Right? If you ask e-commerce companies, they would say 80% of the GMV comes from 5 to 6 million customers. Right? Same for ride-hailing companies. They'll tell you 10, 15 million customers contribute to 80% of all the revenue and the rides. 50% of people who fly every day in India are frequent flyers who fly multiple times a quarter. Right? So we have to still build. We are still reliant on the top 25 million families. The per capita income depth has to grow for many of these companies to really, really monetize well, because they have reached hundreds of millions of customers, but they don't have any money.
But that's been the case with India. This has actually, you know, this breakthrough of the per capita consumption, or even the, you know, number of actual households that are part of the, you know, sort of the consuming population. That growth, that change has been remarkably slow compared to other emerging economies also, and definitely slower than China, for instance. Yeah. What, in your perspective, would you think are the main reasons why that is so?
We've talked about this topic, but I'll just double click anyways. I think, and I'm being super simplistic about it, but we literally have one gender contributing to the per capita income of the country. The urban female participation of labor is not to the level it should be. We are probably the lowest in all the regions around. Same is happening to rural. 92% of credit cards in India are owned by men. 95% of all loans in Indian are taken by men. 90% of all AUM in some financial assets is still with men. So I think we are, China, before it took off, had 96% participation of women in the urban workforce.
Okay.
Right? And even now, it's still at 70-75%. Right? We are in the sub 10% number. And is that number growing or not? I have not kept up with the numbers, but what I last checked, it was declining. In COVID, it went down, right? So I think we really have to break out of that mindset, because consumption is not going to take off unless the per capita income really, really takes off. The key ingredient for me to become a developed nation is to really solve this one metric, because we can't be literally in the bottom of the charts when it comes to female participation of labor. It is something that needs to change dramatically.
So basically, you're saying single income households are not going to move the needle.
We all know that, right? There are too many dependents in India, and it's almost culturally acceptable that, okay, we have dependents, right? And we have not managed to kind of really break out of that. And if you look at India's scale, this thing is not dramatically changing. But we've always known that academically, like, women have done better consistently on all the exams. You see that data, but you see the workforce participation just tanks from the same cultural reasons that we've always had.
Is that something that worries tech entrepreneurs? Because y'all are building for the consuming population, right? A lot of your business models are predicated on India's consumption rising.
Everybody should be worried about this. If you expect the country to become a developed nation.
Okay.
And I don't think this is an interchangeable thing that, okay, you can become a developed nation and not solve this one metric. It has to be addressed. And yes, consumption does matter because of that. You cannot, a dual income household creates 10 jobs naturally, like by the virtue of a lot of people assisting that family and so on and so forth, right? But we are getting to a place where this is not dramatically changing. One scary correlation of this is that a lot of countries got to develop nation thing. One of the things that you observed is that when women got truly independent, the divorce rate goes up, right? We have not seen that. Now, I'm not wishing for the country's divorce rate to go up, but I'm just saying that we have to look at these signs and signals to know how are we really progressing as a nation.
You know, I was just talking about women's participation in the workforce. The other thing I wanted to also ask you is how are they in, you know, you see a lot of founders come to you with their pitches and so on. How does it rank? Like, do you see women founders coming and making their pitch?
Yeah, I think a lot of participation coming from women to do that. And I think we will see many more women will actually take the path of entrepreneurship versus wait for the job path to happen for them. But I don't think one invest basis these factors ever. I don't think or hires basis this factor. But I think I would wish more people participated in that. When I go to 2017 when I went to China, every tech startup, every meeting, more women were there in the room than men, consistently.
Okay. Across the tech...
Across product meetings, like any meeting. Like you just go there and you're like... And that's, by the way, that's the first time I realized we have a female participation problem, because till that time I just accepted India is norm. And most people still don't know this. I have spoken to VCs when I came back from China that, what do you think, what percentage of women work? And they said like 50, 60%. I was like, have you seen the airport? There are no women. Have you seen like ride hailing? There are no women. Like everywhere they are missing. So I don't know. We are just not talking about it enough.
Still struggling with that, right? Definitely. I think we would want more of the audience to actually discuss this with you. I think these are topics.
We can also discuss some light topics if you guys prefer, but happy to answer anything. I can't hear you.
Okay, I want to pick up on something you said right at the beginning when you were describing the attributes of an entrepreneur, and you said thick-skinned. I'm not convinced about that particular one, so I have a question for you. Are you sensitive to mockery of CRED's business model, and how do you cope with it?
I am really worried when we'll stop getting mocked, because nobody cares about us anymore then. So I'm sensitive to that part. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. So yes, I do care. As a brand, you should care that people should talk about it and feel something about it. Otherwise, you can become irrelevant very quickly in the world that we live in right now. And I think the reason you have to be thick-skinned, because it should matter to be relevant, but it should not impact you and your decision and your long-term vision on how you do things. But it does impact the team very differently, because what happens is that every small thing that happens, right, they have not used to mockery, right? So you have to like make them understand. I have at least 6 unicorn founders call me when they started getting the first mockery, that, hey, how do you deal with this? And I'm like, first, welcome to the club. And two, I was like, this is life. Just accept this. Just do what is right, and keep doing it, because you will rarely see somebody who's done more than you or failed more than you mock you consistently.
I have a question. I want to know the scale in which you think. Like, is it 3 years, 5 years, 10, 15, or you have plans for all of them? Like, what is the scale in which you think while making decisions? Anyway.
So, I'm not very structured in my thinking. So I sometimes think in the scale of what will happen to humanity 30 years from now, on what will we do with. So I'm little bit unstructured in my brain, more creative brain than let's say more logical brain about these topics. But I do think I do read a lot of history, so that I can predict future in some ways. But when it comes to planning, I usually think about being. So when I thought about CRED, my logic was very simple. I am in the largest category that exists in terms of revenue, profit, and market cap. Even if I get this much, it'll be a large company, right? So this is how I think, but I don't go into this level of thing. But when it comes to CRED, it was significantly more planned than Freecharge was. Freecharge was accidentally sometimes a marketing company, sometimes a payments company, sometimes it was a rewards company. It went all over the place. But CRED is much more deliberate in execution. So I would say till date, everything that we've executed was something that I had planned in 2017, 2018. I'm still executing on that. But I don't know if I think in these terms. I'm not saying it should not be done. I'm not the type who can think like this.
Hi, Kunal. Arpita here. My question is about the importance of branding and marketing in your businesses, because I personally admire, the strategies that your company has had.
Thank you.
And I'm a brand consultant, so this question comes on the back of that. You did mention sales as one of the traits, the ability to sell, right? But I also believe that today, in today's day and age, the brand building and marketing angle, how important do you think that is also for entrepreneurs, more than sales in some cases? What's your view on that?
Yeah. To me, if I have to summarize brand in one word, is trust, right? Ultimately, people have to trust you. And trust can be arrived in multiple ways. But I think when we're building for the affluent customers, we realize that unless we go out there and build a brand first, it's very hard for them to transact large amounts with us and trust us with their money or their cards or whatever. You have to establish that you are a brand that is here to stay and understand some of these things. We just took different creative routes in our approach. So we never really hired an ad agency ever. We do not even have anybody from traditional brand marketing or marketing background in our team. I am a MBA dropout myself. So I just figured that the lot of time the playbooks get outdated, but a lot of people who are proud of their playbooks are so proud of it that they don't want to change anything. So we benefited because all our ads, like a lot of people just said, everybody discussed our ads. And nobody got to know that that was exactly my goal with that ads. Like, somebody will tell you what CRED is on a WhatsApp group, but the fact that you spoke about CRED was what the brand's purpose was, right? So I think the importance is slowly getting understood, because you see almost all unicorns, at least in the consumer space, built on a lot of branding of high quality done behind the scenes. But I think a lot of the times people confuse brand is not just about ads you do. For example, we have invested heavily on design, right? And we realize that a concept of beauty is still missing. A lot of people believe in hacking things fast and just shipping whatever, but you can't create trust when the link is broken and something is not well aligned and it's not designed and the color schemes all over the place. I think brand is something that you have to live consistently, right? Also, a lot of times people confuse branding as just constantly telling people, oh, we have done this. Like all the founders go and tell everything. Like I barely talk about CRED on my social media because ultimately nobody wants to listen to, they want to know why you do what you do in life versus, oh, let me sell something to you, let me do something And that's where I think the brand part is slowly getting understood. But comes to core understanding of human behavior is still very low. How many of you studied more than human behavior for more than 10 hours in your life? Okay, great. Now it's capitalism that you should do. But when you connect the dots, you'll make money.
Hey, hi Kunal, Alok this side. So, like in youth, what I have seen and what I personally see is in social media or everywhere, an entrepreneur is equal to or somehow similar as a problem solver. So, and you talk about capitalism a lot, right? So, at what level you are a problem solver, and how do you segregate which problem will make you money?
It's a great question. First of all, capitalism and problem solving is very deeply linked. So once you study capitalism, you will see how it's exactly the same thing. If you meet the top table tennis player, top badminton player, and top cricket player, you will find out that their effort to become the top athlete is not too different. It requires the same amount of rigor, same amount of effort, same amount of pain to really excel. But the prize money in each of the sport is not the same. Right? So a lot of times I've seen that people don't pick the sport which is likely to get the most amount of prize money. And I'm not saying that you should choose sport like that unless you like making money. Right? And it's important to know the nuance. Now, my logic is very simple. Where is the largest revenue pool? Where is the largest profit pool? Who's spending money? Where is the thing? Most people have no interest in macroeconomic data. Because a lot of times when you're studying engineering, I'm assuming you're an engineer. Okay, perfect. You like solving problems, but not interested in the prize money of solving the problems. Because that requires capitalist mind to say, if I solve this problem, what is the prize money? For example, let's say you invent a drug that makes everybody lose their glasses and see 10x better. You will be a trillionaire, right? So the prize money is very clearly defined on how big the problem is, on how much people would be willing to pay for that. But a lot of times people say, oh, I had this problem where I had a problem of not being able to get laundry done, so I built a laundry startup, right? Nobody cares in India for that, right? Like, we've solved this problem, right? So a lot of times this thing of which problem to solve should be coming with the mindset that if it solves, who will pay for it, how many people will pay for it, and will they continue to pay for it for a long period of time, right? If you combine these combinations of that, and therefore it's sometimes better to study macroeconomic data and patterns versus try to copy paste. A lot of times Western ideas copied in India fail because it's not a problem over here, right? Laundry startup would be a great idea in New York to build, not so much over here, right? And therefore, let me give another example. There's a two-wheeler auto cabs. These three things can take you to point A to point B in Bangalore, right? Surprisingly, you'll see it's not the poor people who take the two-wheeler. It's actually the affluent people who take two-wheeler sometimes because they care about time to reach faster. So the two-wheeler is faster to get there, so you will find an inverse correlation. And thanks to great weather, you can actually sit on a two-wheeler and get there, right? So therefore, you do not understand that how will things get solved and who will pay for it. But it's a complex one to understand, but always think about the prize money. And VCs make money on only 5% of companies that they invested in. But sometimes they can make enough money that can pay for the whole fund. Now, this will only happen if you have large prize money at the end of it. So investable business. So for example, a lot of people say, oh, I built this startup that sells this food item. That's not going to create the VC outcome that they are taking the risk for. Venture capital is about, I invest with very little hope to make money, but if it makes going to make a lot of money. But if your industry itself is limited, it's not going to make it.
Kunal, just wanted to kind of highlight to your point about women per se. India has a phenomenally large percentage of unorganized sector versus the organized sector. So even if you were to take, let's say, help at home, invariably it's the women who work and give the money to the husband who then, spends it. But control is often with the man, but earning is with the women. So I'm not too sure if the metrics of measurement in India is more towards the organized sector rather than the unorganized sector. So there's a talk about the rise of the new urban elite. So you might want to look at it.
No, I did see
Which
that.
talk a lot more about in South India, women being the larger segment per se. So I was just curious about whether you looked at that part of it. As
I
well.
have.
Okay.
My logic is slightly more simplistic, as I said. I would like to see participation in income, assets, loans, which will actually create some propulsion in some ways for
It's a
them.
societal issue,
Now,
I think,
unorganized thing, I think we are, just because we have an example of maid, we think that, oh, a lot of women are actually fully employed. The amount of women who are just at home, cooking and taking care of kids is just immense in the country as well. And there is enough data published about this, which I would request for you to see as well. The benchmarking is global,
Yeah.
and our ranking is also globally measured. So I'm not one who's defining any of these metrics.
Hi. I think that timing was good because I had another question on the female labor force participation thing. Because from the historical perspective as well, right, which is that the countries where that has happened through some kind of massive intervention. So in the Western countries, it was the World War that really brought women into the workforce in a big way. In China, like you mentioned, Soviet Union, it was huge. Government intervention that was aimed at breaking the family.
Surprisingly,
in certain-
community played a big role. Of
Yeah,
women coming
exactly.
to the
So
workforce.
and even in primary education, which is
Yes.
lacking in India, right? I mean, they did these devastating disasters for 30, 40-year period, but it laid the foundation for later waves of capitalist growth in some roundabout way with unintended consequences. So I was wondering, in terms of like doing that in India, something, I know it would not be acceptable social policy, state policy here to highly intervene in breaking the family to make women, independent earners or consumers. So I was wondering if you think that the binding constraint on women, it's going to be solved from the firm's end or from the state's end or some other, I mean, if you have any solution.
It is cultures at the family. Firms can't solve it. I mean, I wish firms could really solve it. They can make it easier. They can facilitate this to change in ratio. But the core motivation is at the user level and at the family level. And I think we have a long way to go to improve that. And I don't know. I'm not an expert on public policy to make a comment on this. But I think we have a thing. Maybe Archana is a better comment on this topic.
No, I don't know if it's a better comment, but I think it's important because we're talking what employers can do, right? I think creating safe spaces for women, definitely, because I think that's a big issue. A lot of the reason why women also don't sort of persevere within workforces is also a lack of, issues about commuting, safety at the workplace. I think these are two big issues which employers can definitely take a look at.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with society and so on.
Yeah.
And I mean, on the whole, we have to have an understanding that you're not doing women a favor by saying that by creating these systems that make it easier and better for women to join the workforce. But yes, I think some of it institutionally and structurally needs to be done.
Yep. Agreed.
I think that's an important point.
Yeah.
Hi, Kunal. Thank you.
Sandhya, maybe now you can go this way also.
So, Kunal, 2-3 short questions. First one is, you talked about...
I won't remember as many, so you should just ask me one at a time, or just ask me one.
Sure.
I have terrible memory.
You talked about celebrating failures. How do you recommend we can do that? Second question, very small ones, yes. How many founders have you been able to influence to be able to think like you who would pay forward? And third small question is, how many companies are you helping become best place to work, not just in terms of funding and firing this culture of best place to work, I don't know how many people talk about even when they're talking about creating a company.
I already forgot your first question. I genuinely have a memory problem, so I can't remember. I'll try to answer whatever I can remember, so I will not go back to going to the questions. I don't track who's paying it forward. My job is to do what I'm doing, and hopefully somebody will do that in some way, and I'm not here to kind of be this school teacher who says, I'm not this guy who wants my legacy to be this. I don't believe in legacy. I believe the best people of the planet have been forgotten in 100 years from now, so we should not ever imagine and wish for that. So I don't want to think about that. We do care a lot about best place to work. We care about NPS, we care about referral. 70% of people at CRED have been hired through somebody recommending from the company to get hired. And I think it's a good, healthy metric to see if you're doing a good job on that. I forgot your first question, so we'll skip that.
Yeah. I have a question. You mentioned in passing about some of your plans of 2017-18, which you are in the execution mode. And given the importance of execution in every business, particularly in a startup, what are some of your mantras of successfully executing? And a question related to that is, in a world which is so filled with data, how do you separate all the warning signals and the data that come to you, the noise, from what is actually useful during the course of execution?
It's a great question. I am nowhere anywhere close to some of the big companies who are execution rigor machines. Startups are still weak at becoming good at execution. So I would say I would not want to put myself in the position. I think startups do a good job of innovating and doing something that nobody else is doing. But I think we are far away from getting the rigor right to build large-scale companies. We are still in our early days of that, so I would not want to give any mantras on execution. I think on innovation, what I have seen is that trusting younger people is significantly better than expertise, because when it comes to the changing world, they are natural at it, and while we are trying to figure out what the world is becoming. So I think relying a lot more on younger people for innovation is probably a mantra I would give to most people. In many big companies, I see that the head of technology is 50, 55-year-old person who's trying to do that. At 45, I struggle to keep up with what's happening to a 21-year-old. So I think just empowering more people and reducing the average age of the company is a way to become more innovative. When it comes to, I forgot the second question. Data, yeah, sorry. The thing is, if you are paid well in life to only have that exact skill in life. So ultimately, subjective decisions, which is incomplete data or a lot of data, is going to be life going forward all the time. So to me, the biggest skill that will matter is extraordinary judgment, which is with flood of information or absence of information, which both exist parallelly at most times. But I think the judgment part is going to become even more important as the rate of change of the world is growing faster and faster, right? How do you prepare for AI? What will you tell the kid what to study for their education right now, right? Like engineering, will it matter? Will you be coding? Will you not be coding? How do you know that? But improving judgment is going to be the biggest skill. And I think ultimately, all of us, entrepreneurs or CEOs, or anybody who's like leading the show, their core role is to get better at this. And I don't have a technique, I wish, but I think what I have seen now as a pattern, there are two types of people who look at data and build an hypothesis, and people who have an hypothesis and validate with data. I am seeing the second type to be winning a lot more because there's no time to look at data and build an hypothesis.
Hi. In the early days, as a non-tech guy and a non-finance guy, how did you ensure that the tech guys, you control the insecurities working with the tech and the finance guys, and how did you ensure that you are still in the command?
Oh my God, you're bringing me terrible memories back in my life. I struggled very hard to get people. I had no batchmates or alumni or anybody from my college to hire. Because imagine trying to get philosophy majors to come work with me in tech startups. Would have been a disaster. So I had rough time. I realized that raising money from Sequoia Capital helped me get one badge like an IIT to say, oh, this guy must be doing something. But I still had to convince people to come to office they would log into my server and say, oh, you're doing so many transactions, really? Oh, let me check. Like, we had to really convince, get people to come to our board meetings, get people to, so we've hired in the most thing, and then eventually we realized that if you convince a few people, they can convince a few people, and so we have relied on referral a lot more. But now it's a different stage. Now, because I've built a few companies and I have some judgment and I have some followers in life, I can get there. But it was extremely hard. And that actually made me significantly more humble about realizing that selling is your full-time job all the time. Even now, a lot of people who have done large-scale companies, they would not come to a startup just because it's some cool startup that CRED is building. You will still struggle to get some other company from big companies to move because they want stability, which startups can't promise.
Hi, Kunal. My question's around fame. Seems to be one of those things that attracts a lot of envy on the outside, but is obviously very stultifying once you have it, right? And since every tweet of yours and every opinion on LinkedIn like attracts so much derision and ridicule, would you take an option where if you could take out some of your net worth and just go back to being rich and anonymous, would you take that versus being...
All day long. All day long. I think it's the worst thing that one can wish for. Especially because you become an object for people as soon as you get fame, right? If you are somewhere, people are recording you like a zoo animal that passing through and all of that stuff, and it's not something that is comfortable. And I think if I had to go back in time, I would choose that all day long. There are some benefits of that. One should not forget that when I launched CRED, I could get, like, say, a few 100,000 customers to come in because I had some social media following, so I would not want to wish that away. But if I have to really be honest about this, I think the fame part, it causes a lot of negative, which also impacts, like, a new team member comes to office and says, I want to take a selfie with you. And I'm like, that's not my role in your life. And I think that part is problematic. And I think you attract a very different kind of cohort because fame is super exciting and for people. Like I stay close to, I have a rental apartment in Bandra where close to Shah Rukh Khan's house, and I see this hundreds of thousands of people coming to just be in that thing, and the fame is so addictive. So I don't know. I would not wish for it ever again.
And the second part of that question was, like you said, fame brings distribution for sure. But if you had an option of, let's say, going back into dark mode and just focus on building over 20, 30 years, rather than like have every decision of yours being in the spotlight all the time, which one would you take now? So.
I don't know if I can make that decision. There are positives and negatives. You will also be heard because you have the place. You'll also be feared, by the way, because you have distribution, right? I mean, funny times, sometimes an article gets published, I got a journalist to ping me, can you retweet it, because these people will read that article, right? So it's an interesting thing that has happened because of the dynamic of that. So I don't know how would I pick. I would definitely change a few things here and there.
Hi, Kunal. My question to you is from the fact that I'm a student of history and capitalism both, fortunately, right? Since COVID, the investments in mid-cap and small-cap mutual funds have significantly gone up. The credit card consumption has significantly gone up. The number of credit card holders has gone up to the tune where I don't get a place in the airport lounge and I had to bump up to Amex Digital, right? Whenever this kind of greed and risk-taking ability has suddenly spiked in any economy, be it China, be it America, right? You would have seen a major correction, like, for example, the dot-com bubble that happened, right? And we are, according to me, but don't take me for that, and that's why I'm asking the question, there is an AI bubble exactly how .com was, that any other company just slaps an AI tag against its name, there's a frenzy of investors trying to get into the company, right? As a student of history yourself, right, any recommendation that you would want to make to public at large about the next phase that we're entering to avoid the mistakes of the cyclic nature, where there's a deep correction, where suddenly there's a huge increase in risk-taking ability, capital consumption, capital production goes up, but there's also a significant correction that happens with time, right?
The advice is as age old as it gets, like anybody who's trying to get rich fast is going to have some bad news happen to them all the time, and it comes in many different shapes and forms now, or get-rich schemes. I believe that markets or not markets, the speculative nature of the world that we are living in right now, it's very hard to predict how the world will behave in some time, and I think everyone has to be measured about these topics. But I'm not nobody to predict that what is happening to the stock market and what is the pricing and what's the valuation. I don't honestly know. But I do believe that I have seen one pattern consistently. Every time people act out of absolute emotion, when it comes to matters of money, it does not end well.
Hi, Kunal. This is the second time I'm meeting you, if you can remember.
My memory has been...
Okay, I'm sorry about that. So I have a question which is regarding startups and founders. So how, like, as you said, you have invested in more than 200 plus startups. So what do you think of a single founder getting this platform built by a third person, getting a CFO or anybody, hiring them and working as a successful startup, or a person who's building a team and then going for a startup, like build the whole project? And with that...
I did not understand the question. Sorry.
So let's say I'm a founder.
Huh.
I'm a single founder. I don't have any tech co-founder or anybody.
Sure.
I get my tech built by some other person, like some agency or something, consultancy.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, boss. Like, all of these things don't matter. You have co-founder, you have this, that. Are you solving a problem? Do people pay for it? Are people interested in it? Are people giving you time for it? Those are the things that matter. You can fix all these things in the long term.
Because when I went out for pitching, that's where I got to know that all the ventures and everybody look for a team, but not for the founder who's actually solving the problem.
That's fine. But if you had traction, they would not care if you have a team or not.
Okay. And what would you...
We should give more chance to more people.
Yeah, last one.
No. We should give chance to more people.
Hi, Kunal.
You can stand. It's okay.
So there are three words that I want to focus: enabler, investing, and radical thinker. So enabler is something like opportunity. If there are enough opportunity, obviously woman participation will come on. If there are enough opportunity or enough incubator, startup will thrive. So that's the enabler. Investing, done by everyone. Obviously you have done more than 200. Second is radical thinker. Radical thinker is something out of here, nobody...
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm. My memory problem is so that I'm already gone for that stuff. Can you come to the question?
So basically, I'm asking, what's wrong with investing 10 lakh to enable someone in pre-seed stage and get 1%? What's wrong with that? Like, if
Nothing
you are
wrong with anything in life. I don't know.
No, why people are not doing that way?
I can't comment for people, yaar.
So for you?
I believe that people, when they invest, it's their decision. And our job is to make sure that we match their expectations versus trying to hope that they are not able to see. It's a little bit like you are saying that, hey, why is this person not dating me? Why are they not able to see it? Are you doing a good job of convincing them?
I'm just asking, like, is this not logical way to think? Like, is it not that
investing is not logical if you have figured out by now. It is emotional in some ways, but people do based on their biases. It's very hard to make somebody think that, oh, but you are perfect. It doesn't work that way. I'm going to respect Sandhya's microphone strategy. She's giving me strict instructions.
Hi, Kunal. So my question is, what key metrics do you prioritize when making business decisions, and how do you determine when it is better to trust your gut feeling over the data-driven matrices?
Most decisions when you make, when you are leading a company, the data will be missing. So you still have to make decisions. If you keep waiting for data, you're already too late. So the answer is that when there is data, you're not needed for the decision. Your team can make it. And when there is no data, you are needed. So it's gut feeling. Make sense?
Hi, Kunal. So you had quickly glanced through bootstrapping in India. So I just wanted to check if there is hope for bootstrapping in India still.
99% of India's companies are bootstrapped.
Okay. I'm talking about really making it big and making it worldwide.
Most public listed companies in India who are very large market cap are bootstrapped.
That is one question. And the second one is, final question, is since you're also an angel investor, what do you see in the investor before investing? Like, let's say,
In
just
the
the top three
in the
things.
founder?
In the founder, yeah.
Usually hunger, ambition, slope, where have they come from? Do they understand more about the industry than I understand about their industry? Who's referring them? Do I understand anything about that space? Many factors. I don't think I have a pattern, honestly. But you have to feel some source of energy when you meet them.
Hey, what are some lesser known or non-mainstream books that you've read that have changed your way of thinking or that you'd talk about?
I don't believe in recommending books because it creates this unique echo chamber of just everybody reading the same thing and just saying the same thing. I have had people who walked up to me and told me my tweet as if they heard it somewhere, and so so I believe that everybody should discover their own books. There's one book outside right now that I would recommend that you should get.
Thank you.
Hi, Kunal. So I have two questions. Second would be just a comment then.
Sandy, I just wanted to add to the point of the bootstrap question here. If you are a Bangalore resident, you'll know that some of India's best-known fintech companies are bootstrapped and from Bangalore, Zerodha being a case in
There
point.
are so many of them.
So many of them.
So many of them.
Okay. So the question, so suppose I have a product ready. What shall I focus more on? First thing, shall I focus more on the marketing aspect of it? Or the second thing is the monetization, at least to keep the setup ready once I get the audience to monetize it?
If you have the ability to raise capital to sustain without monetization, focus on distribution. Otherwise, start making money from day one.
Okay, and second would be a comment on the women aspect.
Yes, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So back when I just started working, my mother was like, okay, explore your career, but just keep in mind, tomorrow when you get married, your husband might not want you to work. So just keep that in mind. But I thought, okay, fine, she is not that educated, so cool. But when I came to Bangalore, talked to my male colleagues, talked to many men on this topic, there was a very strange observation I saw. Men are glorifying it, that, I asked my wife to leave her job so that at least she can be a good homemaker and raise the next generation beautifully. Comparing, with Sudha Murthy, rather than even thinking about Indira Nui. I have heard men talking about, women leading can be terrible, giving example of Indira Gandhi. So
I don't know what to say. I've been screaming about the same topics in some ways, but you've articulated with more actual stuff happening.
So this is culturally inherited, and it's very difficult until and unless, the men would change. And
I agree with you.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
That's one reason why you don't see women participation
I
so much.
100% agree with you.
On behalf of the Bangalore International Center and our director Vikram, I'd like to thank Kunal and Archana for the incredibly interesting talk. Thank you all of you for your questions. Thank you all for being here, and have an excellent weekend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.